Our steering arrangement is the same one that came with the boat when it was built in 1944. It still works, but it's a bit of a mess, leaking oil and taking up a ton of space. So, with pain in our hearts, we have to say goodbye to this piece of history and replace it with something future-proof. My name is Gijs, and this is my dad. And this is Schoener Tijgerhaai. 2 years ago, we started rebuilding this 81-year-old ship to get her ready for new adventures. And we're sharing the process with you. Subscribe to stay tuned. We are resuming work in the aft ship, where we're giving the saloon and aft cabin a big makeover, to use the available space more effectively. Previously, we already removed all the interior, exposing the bare steel, which got some well-needed attention. And we installed new timbers. Next, we're going to take out the bulkhead in the middle to use the space more effectively. With that, it's inevitable to look at the old steering gear, which takes up a substantial amount of space. We want to replace it anyway, because the cylinders are leaking and much bigger and heavier than they need to be. A quick dive into the working principle of steering gear. Traditionally, and on smaller boats, the rudder is controlled by a tiller, powered by human muscle. To be able to control the rudder with more force and from further away, it's very common to use hydraulics. So there is a steering wheel, which is connected to a hydraulic pump that can pump oil in two directions. Down at the steering gear, hydraulic cylinders push the rudder to port or starboard. In our case, the rudder shaft has a very short tiller, with on each side a cylinder that can push against that tiller. The steering gear is very old, and these are single-acting cylinders. In other words, hydraulic oil can apply force on only one side, meaning the hydraulic cylinder can push the rudder tiller away, but it cannot pull it back in. To get the rudder tiller to the original position, a second cylinder is necessary in the opposite direction. Unsurprisingly, technology has come a long way in the past 81 years. Modern steering systems typically use double-acting cylinders, which can push and pull. This means that theoretically you could do with only one cylinder. Or you could use two cylinders that are half the size of the old single-acting ones, and they don't have to be in opposing directions. In other words, if we want to save space, double-acting is the way to go. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. First, the whole thing has to be dismantled. Modern hydraulic cylinders are usually mounted on pivot bearings. These old ones aren't. They have no allowance for movement at all. They must be installed in perfectly opposing directions to function properly. To get this perfect alignment, the cylinders are not only fixed to the steering gear foundation, but they're also connected by a heavy beam that secures them together. The ship used to have a working autopilot, with an electric pump and solenoid valves. We will make all that stuff work again, but for now we're taking it out. Later on we'll find a new place for all the separate components. Now let's have a go at removing the cylinders. With the clamp removed and both cylinders retracted, you can nicely see the small rudder tiller. Before we start removing more of the old steering gear foundation, it is wise to start building the new one. These are structural parts of the ship that, among other things, support the deck above. For the new steering gear, in order to use as little space as possible, we chose to have both new cylinders pointing to the aft, instead of to the sides. Some plywood assisted design helps us to figure out what shape we have to cut these heavy sheets of used but still good metal into. We do try to paint as much as possible while everything is easy to reach, even though we might have to add a final layer after the whole thing is finished. The location of the mounts of the steering gear is where a big chunk of the rudder force is transferred to the hull of the ship, so that's where the foundation has to be the strongest. Now that the cylinders are pointing to the aft and not to the sides, the little rudder tiller is pointing in a direction that we cannot use. Rotating it is no option because there's a keyway routed into the rudder shaft. It is very good at transferring the pushing and pulling force of the cylinders to the rudder shaft though, so we're still gonna use it. We just need a yoke to transfer the force from the cylinders to the tiller. As said before, the steering gear foundation also supports the deck above. Without the old cylinders, the deck support pillars are in an inconvenient location, but before removing them, we have to make sure the deck does not drop down on our heads. The problem is we only have enough material to install one new pillar. So for the other one, we have to cannibalize the old floor frames. With the second support pillar in place, we figured it would be smart to use the new deck supports as frame for all the components of the autopilot as well. And since we keep tripping over them on the saloon floor, we're going to get that out of the way first. So we installed two extra lighter angle profiles to create the four corners of a cabinet that everything should fit into. And we started puzzling. The pump gets a new place, as well as the hydraulic oil tank. This is a good moment to have a look inside the tank, because it probably has not been opened for more than 30 years. And indeed, there's lots of oily sludge at the bottom. Clean, with a new gasket for the cover and two new oil filters, the tank is ready to be filled with clean oil. Now that the deck is supported and we have all components of the autopilot out of the way, we can continue removing the old foundation. and after that, the remainder of the old bulkhead. Now that we can walk around freely, it's time to connect the new hydraulic cylinders. Since we gave all the components of the new steering gear a new location, none of the pipes fit anymore. So they all have to be rebent to connect to every component. After which they all get a good coat of paint. The steering gear used to be very well supported to the sides, which was necessary with the old arrangement. Now that we've removed all that, we have to clean up and build back a little bit to bring back a little bit of strength and support the future floor all the way in the aft. With all the components and pipes in place, we can connect all the electrics as well, starting with the solenoid valves to control the flow of oil to the cylinders. And the electric motor. All this stuff was installed before as well, but the pump for the hydraulic oil used to pump very fast. It's a simple 24 volts electric motor, and the beauty of those is that you can make them run slower by just lowering the voltage. In order to do just that, they had installed this big resistor in series with the motor, effectively cutting the voltage in half. The thing with the resistor, however, is that it's always resisting. Which means, for a big one like this, that it's consuming a lot of power for nothing. Nowadays, there's way more efficient ways to turn 24 volts into 12 volts, like a simple DC-DC converter. After giving everything a good layer of paint, it's time to fill the system with oil, check for leaks and see if everything works. Starting with this lower tank, which is where the electric pump gets its oil from. When that is fully topped up, I'm filling the last bit into the steering wheel pump house on deck, which acts as an expansion and deaeration tank. To get the air out of all the components, we have to move the cylinders in and out to their maximum a couple of times, and then add some more oil. The steering wheel in the wheelhouse cannot be connected yet, because the pipes have to be relocated before we can connect them. But they're running under the floor of the saloon, so taking that out is high on the to-do list. We can already set up the autopilot. See if the old pump still wants to fire up on the lowered voltage. For that, we do temporarily need the navigation computer because it gives rudder commands to the autopilot. Not bad. We can maneuver the ship again. And apart from the floor in the saloon, we are finished taking stuff out of the aft ship. So we can look at interior options and start building again. But this is all for now. If you have any questions or remarks, please let us know in the comments. Thank you for watching and I'll see you next time.